Welcome to Doing the Dang Thing podcast. I am your host, Jill Schmeeding, and this podcast is all about helping everyday women play big and aspire for more. On today's episode, I have another interview with an amazing woman who is playing big in her life in so many ways. And this is one of my favorite things about doing this podcast, that is giving a platform, providing space for women to be heard, for women to speak up and talk about the ways in which they are playing big. Nhi Nguyen is somebody who I just met not too long ago, and she made a huge impression on me. And so I wanted to bring her on the show and just share her story. So without further ado, please welcome Nhi to the show. Nhi, I really appreciate you being on the show and coming on and talking about how you play big in your life.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Most welcome. It's been a new friendship for both of us, and I just wanted to hear your thoughts on playing big, getting outside of your comfort zone, what that looks like for you. And I obviously know one of the stories, and so I just really would love to share that with my audience. But before we do, let's just say who you are.
Yeah, I'm like a life dabbler. You know how some people, they're like, oh, I'm going to grow up and be a doctor. And they're exactly that. Like,
Yes.
I never had like a straight sense of direction. I just like to dabble things. And I've gotten to understand that that's okay. Like, you can be a dabbler in life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's also like kind of a safer way in life. Like, if you're just so focused on this one thing, what happens if that one thing doesn't work out? And then you're like, that was my whole identity. Like, what do I do now? So it's nice to be able to dabble, because then you feel more flexible to do, well, that doesn't work out. Well, just move over this way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, this is kind of a topic for another day, but it's like the whole idea of what like our parents and the generations before us, where they stayed at a company for 40 to 50 years. I know my friend's parent actually is celebrating 50 years at the same company. It's amazing to me that people can do that. I just told someone just actually, who was it? Somebody that I worked with or somewhere else was celebrating like 36 years. And I said, I don't think I've ever done anything for 36 years in my entire life,
Like, live other than breathe.
I know. There's certain things, right? Yeah. But it's kind of crazy. So besides all of that, you also volunteer for American Red Cross as a first responder. Tell me a little bit about that, because that's a big deal.
Yeah, so I mean, everyone is really kind of familiar with the American Red Cross does. You see them go to big disasters and help out, but I do more of what they call blue sky operations, which is just disasters in everyday life. So it could be like a house fire or apartment fire, or maybe just someone out on the street needing help. So usually I respond to house and apartment fires. I sign up for 4 12-hour shifts a month. And if a fire happens to occur, then they will call the Red Cross. We go out there, we talk to the clients, give them some financial assistance to help them for the next couple of days. And then they're going to be followed by the Red Cross for a little while until they get on their feet again.
Okay. So does anyone who's ever had their house burned down get contacted by the Red Cross?
No, the client would have to call us, or the fire department will call us.
Okay.
So we don't like go out and find them unless it was a huge apartment fire and we're missing people somehow. But usually it's the people who need help, they call us and we will respond. Okay.
And what made you decide to do that as a volunteer?
Well, I've always wanted to be of service with somewhat. And I feel like a lot of people, they try to find meaning in their job. Like, they're so unfulfilled by their corporate job that they're like, oh, I'm just going to do something with meaning. And for me, I feel like I could have the best of both worlds, where I can have the job that pays for my bills and be of service and feel like my life is meaningful. So that's why I started volunteering for the Red Cross, because that way I may not feel super fulfilled in my work, but I have other areas in my life where I feel really fulfilled.
Yeah. Oh, you touched on something that I think I have been struggling with my entire life. I had a previous employer actually tell me that I wasn't going to necessarily find my passion within my full-time career. And I was like, screw you, I quit. And then maybe like, 6 8 years later, I'm like, oh damn, I think he was right. Yeah, it's really hard. I think the lucky ones do find a passion within their full-time job, but I also think that the route you're going is very honorable and gets the job done.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like that's the approach that I follow throughout my life too. It's like you're not going to find everything in one partner or one job or one place of living, like a city. You just have to take what's best in each of those areas and create a life that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I agree. So I recently told you that I had a podcast, right? And that it's all about playing big and aspiring for more. And what came to your mind, if you remember, when I told you about that?
I think about where they are right now in their life, like what they're able to do, the person that they're being, and playing big is really just stepping outside of that where you are right now. So it doesn't matter if you like jump way out there, you do something really big, or you just take a small, tiny step, as long as you're outside of what you're comfortable with. That for me is playing big because it's
Yeah.
bigger than where you are at right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the reason why I asked that question is because I do feel sometimes that people hesitate to play big, right? Because they think it means I have to quit my job, I have to move across the country, I have to do something gigantic, get a divorce, whatever, right? Um, but it doesn't mean that at all. And it means just getting outside or just playing a little bit bigger than what you're already doing, just like you explained.
Right. Because I'm a very reserved person. Like I taking a huge risk, like just quitting a job without a plan, that for me that's a big leap. So I'm a more reserved person where I know where I'm uncomfortable, I know where I'm comfortable, and as long as I step outside of being comfortable, that is big for me. So I've done that so often to the point where I feel like my life has gradually gotten bigger since, in my 20s because I take these little steps. So it just kind of depends on your comfort level and how willing you're um, willing to jump into the deep end.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a question I have for you because I've been going through somatic therapy, which is all about how you feel in your body. And I was just wondering if you know the feelings that you have when you're playing big. Kind of how do you recognize this is playing big? This is too big for me. I'm not ready for this quite yet. Or this isn't enough. I need to stretch myself a little bit more. Like, do you have a gauge on how you feel inside your body?
Um, I don't know if I have a gauge per se, but I do notice if I'm feeling different. Like if I am in a heated conversation at work, I can feel like my body shake. I can feel like my heart beating a lot. So I find ways to help me feel comforted physically so that I can go on doing the meeting, for example. Um, like in the sense of traveling, I always feel like there's always a piece of uncertainty that happens when you travel, especially when you travel alone. Like how, as much as you plan, like shit's gonna happen at some point. And so you just start to recognize if you're starting feeling shaky, you're feeling anxious, and then find ways to calm yourself to get on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Like okay, what can I control? What can I control? What's the next step here?
Do you have any tips for any of the listeners out there on how you actually do? Is it breathing exercises, or do you listen to a quick song or something like that, or just sit quietly for a minute?
I definitely don't sit quietly. I have had breakdowns where I'm just out on the street and just frustrated and crying. And for me personally, I have to let that release out. Get all the anxiety, the frustration, the anger, whatever the hell it is, just out there. Because if you're just holding it in, it just makes it worse. If it goes out, then the stress cycle has been complete. And then my brain's straight again. I'm like, okay, these are the facts, this is what I can do, this is what I can control. Okay, let's make a plan from here.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good tip. I like that. And you know what? The thing is I've learned feelings are just or emotions are just kind of a wave, right? You have to just let them pass. And so, as you said, you have to let them out and then you can kind of recenter yourself.
Yeah. It's
That's a good
not
tip.
pretty though. Like I've
Yeah.
cried out like out in the street in public. I've cried in a castle in France because I didn't have no money. Like I didn't know what to do. But it does help just to have the feelings go out and your brain straight again. It's magic.
Yeah. So, in regards to playing big locally, you have something that we talked about already, and I thought it was just really cool. And so, I wanted you to share that on the show.
Well, as I said, I was traveling a lot, and I've noticed that I was always looking for the next travel thing to make my life feel exciting and fulfilled in that way. So I was trying to bring that back home. So one of the rituals I have when I travel is I have one night where I have the fancy ass dinner, wherever it is. Like I save up all my pennies for that one dinner when I travel. So I decided to bring that back home so that I can have that feeling on a regular basis. So I started this thing for myself where every month I will treat myself to a nice restaurant. So I would just get dressed really nice and then go to a fancy restaurant, pay too much money for amazing food. Um, and so I did that for a while. And then one time I went to a restaurant and the waitress asked me, well, am I here for business or, am I traveling? And I was like, well, I'm just having dinner. And when you're a woman eating at a restaurant by yourself, people assume that women don't do that. They're either traveling or on business. And I was just like, I was hungry. I just wanted to have dinner. And she was so like shocked by that for some reason. Maybe because she's a waitress and she doesn't see women eating by themselves that often. She was so in shock. We had a great conversation of why women should be able to go out and just have dinner by themselves and not have to feel judged or anything. And at the end of the conversation, at the end of my dinner, she actually comped my dessert just to encourage me to keep doing what I'm doing. She's like, you're just so amazing. You need to keep doing what you're doing. And here's this awesome dessert. Enjoy. And that was just so cool for me.
That is awesome. I love that, by the way. And I think it's so cool because I have been an individual who has conquered that whole idea of like going out to dinner by myself. I can do it. I did it on my solo trip in Santa Fe. However, you take it to another level by getting dressed up. Like you actually put on the fancy dress and then you go to a fancy restaurant. And so I think that's kind of leveling up to where I'm just like, okay, that creates some sort of like, feeling inside of me where I'm just like, that's stretching me outside of my comfort zone to go to a fancy restaurant and sit in the dining room. Or do you sit at the bar? I didn't ask.
I never really sit at the bar because I just generally enjoy having my own table. I also feel like for me personally, if you're by there by yourself, then they push you to the bar because it's easier for them to seat. And I don't want to feel pushed like that. Like I want the privilege of having my own table, just like everyone else. Just like if I was here with somebody else, they would sit at the table most of the time. So I didn't want to feel like, oh, because I'm single and I'm here by myself, then I should just be pushed to the bar. So I always get my own table.
Yeah, that's awesome. And do you find that I know a lot of people take books or they kind of do something on their phone. Do you find that you do that when you go out to dinner, especially at a fancy place, or do you keep all that stuff hidden and you just kind of enjoy the meal?
I generally just keep everything away just so I can enjoy the experience because even though I've done this for a long time, it's not always a comfortable situation to have dinner by myself, and I want to go through the feelings of being uncomfortable. And if I'm sitting there with my phone, that's the distraction I have for being uncomfortable. So I make a conscious effort to have phones away, don't bring any books, don't bring any notebooks or anything. I just sit there, observe the people, and just enjoy the experience that I'm in.
Yeah. Ooh, that's good. What comes to my mind is what overall lesson have you learned by doing this for so many years and not numbing out by using the phone, not hiding behind a book or a newspaper? That's a very archaic way of doing it, but A book. Yeah. But you know what I mean? What overall lesson would you say that you've learned or you've taken away from your time of going out to dinner and really feeling the feels of being uncomfortable, but like pushing through?
Yeah, there's a couple of things to this. I kind of want to go back to the dressing up part because when you feel good and you look good, then it just makes things more comfortable. There's just like a certain self confidence that you get when you're wearing a nice dress and you know it.
Yes.
So for me, going out to a dinner can be a little bit uncomfortable, but with the dress and the heels, like I feel fabulous. So it makes it a little bit easier. Like I'm a badass. I'm walking down the hallway and that my heels are clacking. So that helps with the experience because I'm naturally an introverted person. So for people to have attention on me, it's a little bit uncomfortable. So the dressing up really helps with that. And you always have to dress up to a nice restaurant anyway. So the whole experience just feels like just elevated. Like it's just romantic, so to speak,
Hmm.
in a single way. Sorry, I forgot like your question,
Oh,
but
that's
I
okay.
just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, yeah. You said you wanted to go back to the dressing up part, which was awesome. And then my question was, what is your overall lesson that you've learned, or and if you've come away with after doing this for so many years, where you actually feel the uncomfortable feelings? Because I feel like so many people, they may go out to dinner, they may go out to lunch by themselves, but they will hide behind something. They will be on their phone. They just cannot. And I'm not dogging on them at all because I know it's really hard, but they just cannot feel the uncomfortable feelings. And so I'm wondering, for those listeners out there that really want to try this, what would you say your overall lesson that you've walked away with, or growth that you've seen?
I would say like if it's uncomfortable, it might always be. Like it just doesn't magically go away. So if you do it once, then yeah, it's uncomfortable. But do it twice at least. Um, because at least by the second time, you know that you've done this before. Because that first time was evidence that you can do this. And if you keep doing it, then you have a whole history of the times that you were uncomfortable and you survived that. So I think that would be like the biggest lesson. Like it's never going to be completely comfortable all the time. It might never be comfortable for you, but at least you have evidence of the things that you've done before that were big, that were uncomfortable, and you got through it. And that should be enough for you to keep going.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's so true. It's interesting. When I went to Santa Fe, I was talking to this older woman. She was probably in her 60s. She was working at a consignment shop where I was looking for some clothes. And I told her that the night before I went out to dinner by myself at this local restaurant. She knew exactly what restaurant I was talking about. And she goes, "Oh my gosh, I did that once. I could never do it again." And I think at that point, she said, I did have a book that I was reading. I was in the dining room. She goes, "I did it once. I don't like the way I feel. I feel like everyone was looking at me. I could never do it again." And I mean, she's in her 60s. So that means her entire life, she has never, I guess, never tried it again or never gone out to dinner. Always have to have somebody with her, or she doesn't get to go out to dinner. And that makes me sad for her. I also talked to an older gentleman who was in his 60s as well, and he said the same thing. He was just like, "Oh, I did that once. I hated the way I felt, and I never did it again." And I was just like, "Wow." And so I think it's just a good lesson for you, or sorry, for what you said, which was like the first time's going to be uncomfortable, but like you have to push through, you have to give it another shot, and it might get a little easier as you do it, which I think most things in life, the more we do it, it gets easier. Most
Right. And
things.
I feel like not only two times, like for anything, like if you're trying a new food, like three times. Like the first time, just to have that initial shock or experience. The second time, like you know what the experience is, and you make a conscious effort to understand that. And the third time is when you can decide whether you like doing this or not, or whether or not you like eating this or not. But at least take three times before you quit on anything.
Yeah. That's good. Good lesson. So, is there a time when someone else played big in your life that it inspired you to play big?
Yeah, like I have a friend since high school. I feel like she's always played big. You know how when you grow up, your like vision of life just gets smaller. Like maybe you wanted to be like an actress or model, something so fabulous when you're 5 years old, but when as you get older, you're like in your teenagers, like, oh, I'm not as pretty to be a model, so I guess I'll just be an accountant or something. You know, your life just kind of gets smaller and smaller as you get older. But my friend, her life just seems to get bigger and bigger as she gets older. So, and she graduated top of our class in high school. In college, she interned at the White House. After college, she became a Peace Corps volunteer. After she graduated and got a job, she was a pro bono family lawyer. And then just recently, she got appointed to be a diplomat for Poland. So, like,
Wow.
her life just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's a lot more things that she's done in between. But she's really someone that I feel inspired by because her life does get bigger as she gets older rather than most people's lives. They just kind of get more narrow.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. And I agree with you, right? When we are kids, excuse me, when we are kids, we are dreaming big. And then you start to like put yourself in a box and you say, like, I can't do this or I can't do that. And then you get to be in like an adult and you're just like completely narrowing everything down. So I think it's awesome that you have a friend who's like an inspiration that you're like, I can actually get bigger and not smaller as I go through
Right.
life. Yeah.
Right.
And is she in her 30s?
Yes.
Yeah, wow, she is playing big, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Um, with playing big, usually I ask my guests if there's three things that other people should consider when attempting to play big. And I think you've already touched on maybe one of them, which is right, like don't just stop at the first time. Try again when you're interested in playing big. I think that's totally very valid thing that someone should consider. Do you have two other items that you could talk about?
Yeah, and I think we touched a little bit of this earlier before, where like it doesn't have to be this huge leap of faith, like way out there. You can take baby steps. So when I started traveling on my own, I started traveling to a US city by myself. Then I took a little leap after that and did US Virgin Islands, which I felt like was still the United States, but like not really. So that was a step out there. And then I did after that the UK because it was a different country, but it still spoke English. And after that, I
Mm-hmm.
went to France. So like those are all baby steps to get where I am now. I think my next step is going to a country that I don't know the language at all. Haven't gotten there yet, but that's probably the next bigger step. But you can see how the progression went. Like it's just little steps along the way to get to where I am now.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That's a very good tip because like I said, I've done Santa Fe as a solo trip. I think I could probably benefit from another US city solo trip before I go international. With that includes a flight that includes a little bit more stress potentially. But we'll see if that actually happens, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if all else fails, just do baby steps and you'll still get progress. It's not as fast as you want, probably, but you know, you're still moving forward.
Yeah.
And the last thing I would say is that sometimes playing big can be pretty lonely, where I feel like most people they are very comfortable in their comfort zone and a small fraction of people are actually playing big. And you may not have the people who are also playing big around you, so it's really important for you to find a tribe of people to help support you. I really want to differentiate between a tribe and having cheerleaders. Because if you're doing all these big things, it's easy to find cheerleaders. But what you really need is a tribe. So when you're succeeding in whatever you're doing, you know, everyone's all happy, right? Like there's no problem there. The issue is when things don't go your way. And a cheerleader would say something like, well, don't worry about him. He sucks. you're awesome, just move on. Or if you didn't get a job that you wanted, like, oh, well, that wasn't meant to be. You're so much better than that anyway. You'll just find another job. And that's what a cheerleader would say. And in some ways, I find that kind of language and viewpoint kind of dismissive of your feelings, and also is not very supportive in a way. So for a tribe, they would say something more like, I'm sorry that you're hurting. I know that relationship meant something for you. Or I'm sorry that you didn't get that job. I know that you really wanted it. How can I support you? And that's the kind of language that a tribe would say for you versus what a cheerleader would say.
And would you say that you have a tribe for yourself? And how did you find those individuals?
I would say collectively it's a tribe. I have very important people that I keep close, that I feel safe to come to them if I'm not feeling well. Because it's very easy to find people who like you when you're happy, but can they be with you when you're not happy? And so I have like different individuals that I can go to, and collectively that makes my tribe.
And there you have it, the interview with Nhi Nguyen. I really appreciate you coming on the show, Nhi, and just sharing all the stories about how you are playing big and aspiring for more in your life. I encourage you, my listeners, to tune in next week, because there is just a little bit more of the interview that I wanted to share with you. When the recording light, so to speak, goes off, people get real. And I think you're going to want to hear what she has to say. So tune in next week as we continue this conversation with Nhi. Take care, everyone.